Every beautiful rose has its thorns, and every velvet story has a sharp edge of reality that cuts deep. Experience the delicate balance of beauty and pain in our latest series of moving human dramas. Hit subscribe now and feel every nuance of the cinematic journey.
A notification came at 6:37 in the morning, when I was still in my work apron and hadn't even taken off my shoes yet. It was from the building management app, the one my sister-in-law had insisted I download so we could all stay connected about the condo. I almost ignored it. I was exhausted. I just finished a 10-hour overnight shift at the hospital. My feet hurt in the specific way that makes you forget your own name, and all I wanted was to eat something cold from the fridge and sleep until noon. But the notification said, lease modification request submitted under your name. I hadn't submitted anything. I stood in my hallway with my coat still on and read it 3 more times. I should back up. My name is Autumn. I'm 31 years old. I'm a respiratory therapist, which means I work odd hours, sleep in broken pieces, and spend most of my days helping people breathe, which is either poetic or ironic depending on the week. Because for the past 2 years, my brother's wife had been slowly squeezing the air out of my life. My brother is Preston. He's 4 years younger than me, and for most of our lives, he was my favorite person. When our dad left, Autumn was 12, Preston was 8. I was the one who made him sandwiches after school and told him the reason Dad didn't call wasn't because of anything Preston did. When our mom got sick the first time, I was the one who stayed home from college orientation to be with him at the hospital. When she got sick the second time, I was the one who handled the paperwork, the hospice calls, the funeral arrangements because Preston couldn't function and I was the older one, and that's just what I did. Mom passed 3 years ago. In her last week, she held my hand and she said, "Just keep an eye on your brother, okay? He needs someone steady." And I said, "Okay, Mom." I meant it. I don't think she meant for it to become what it became. Preston met Ivy 8 months after the funeral. She was charming in the way that certain people are charming, effortlessly, almost like a reflex, and in a way that made you feel like you were the interesting one, not her. By the time I noticed the pattern, I was already deep in it. It started small. Preston had moved into a studio apartment after Mom died, but Ivy didn't like it. Too small, wrong neighborhood, no natural light. They found a 2-bedroom condo on the east side of the city. Nice building, rooftop terrace, doorman. The rent was $2,400 a month. Preston was working part-time at a sporting goods store. Ivy was doing freelance content creation, which as far as I could tell meant she posted pictures of herself on the internet and called it a career. Between the two of them, they could maybe cover $900 a month, generously. Ivy came to me with a spreadsheet, an actual spreadsheet. She sat across from me at my kitchen table and slid her laptop toward me like we were in a business meeting, and she explained with complete confidence that if I contributed $1,500 of $500 a month and co-signed the lease, Preston would be stable enough to focus on growing his career and she could expand her brand and eventually they'd take over the payments fully. I should have laughed. I should have closed the laptop and said, "You have got to be kidding me." Instead, I thought about my mother's face in that hospital bed. I thought about Preston at 8 years old eating a peanut butter sandwich in front of the television because I didn't know how to make anything else, and I signed. That was 22 months ago. Not once in those 22 months had either of them taken over any portion of the payment. The requests evolved gradually, the way water erodes stone. You don't notice the damage until one day, you look down and the ground has changed shape. First it was the cosign and the monthly contribution. Then it was the security deposit because they'd miscalculated. Then Ivy decided the condo needed to be repainted, and she found a painter, and somehow the invoice ended up forwarded to me with a note from Preston that said, "Hey, do you think you could get this one?" Then there was the furniture, the real furniture, not the IKEA stuff, because Ivy needed a proper backdrop for her content. Then there was the new camera. Then the ring light. Then the editing software subscription. Then the brand consultation from someone who charged $400 for a 90-minute Zoom call. Every single time, the ask was wrapped in something soft. It was always Preston really needs this right now, or you know how hard he's working, or most reliably, Mom would have wanted him to have a real home. That last one worked on me longer than I want to admit. I was making good money, not extravagant, but steady, the way healthcare work is, and I had savings, and I kept telling myself it was temporary. Preston was going to find his footing. Ivy was going to start pulling her weight. It was just a hard season. But Ivy didn't act like someone in a hard season. She acted like someone who had done the math and determined that I was a resource, not a person. I remember the exact moment I started to understand what she really was. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I'd come over to drop off some groceries I'd picked up. Nothing dramatic, just some things I'd grabbed because I was at the store and I knew their refrigerator situation. Ivy opened the door and looked at the bags in my hands and said, without even a hello, "Did you get the oat milk?" I put it on the list. Not thank you. Not come in, just, "Did you get the oat milk?" I had not gotten the oat milk. She made a small sound, dismissive, like I'd failed a simple task, and turned back inside. I stood there in the doorway, holding 2 bags of groceries I'd bought with my own money, for people who had not asked me to, and somehow felt like I'd done something wrong. I drove home that afternoon and sat in my car in my parking garage for a while before I could make myself go upstairs. 9 months ago, they told me they wanted to buy a house, not rent a house. Buy one. Custom build. Ivy had found a development on the outskirts of the metro area. New construction, 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, open floor plan, big backyard. She'd already spoken to a builder. She had a floor plan printed out and laminated, which in retrospect tells you everything you need to know about how certain she was that this was going to happen. The base price was $387,000. Preston's credit score was $591. Ivy's was lower. I don't know how to explain the specific kind of audacity it takes to sit across from someone and present them with a laminated floor plan and say, "We need you to be the primary borrower." But that's what happened. Not cosigner this time. Primary borrower. My income, my credit, my name on the mortgage, my liability if anything went wrong. Ivy said it would be fine. Ivy said it was basically the same as the condo situation, just a different type of payment. Ivy said, and I will never forget this, "What else are you going to do with your money? You don't have kids. You're not saving for anything specific." I was saving for a down payment on my own place. I was saving because I'm a single woman in my 30s and I understand that I am the only safety net I will ever have. I was saving because after 2 years of hemorrhaging money into their life, I still had enough left to build something of my own, and I was not ready to hand that over too. But I sat there in her apartment, in the apartment I was paying for, and I said I needed time to think about it. Ivy's face did something complicated. She smiled, but it didn't reach anywhere. She said, "Of course, take all the time you need." And then she said, very quietly, "I just hope Preston doesn't feel like you've given up on him, the way your dad gave up on both of you." I went very still. She said it so gently, like she was concerned, like she was just being honest because she cared. I drove home and I called my best friend Corinne and I said, "I think I'm in trouble." Corinne said, "You've been in trouble. You just finally noticed." I didn't say yes to the mortgage. I didn't say no either. I stalled, the way you do when you're afraid of the answer you know you need to give. I said I was looking into it. I said I needed to talk to a financial advisor. I kept buying time. In the meantime, they found a way to move forward anyway. I still don't fully understand the mechanics of what happened, but apparently Ivy had spoken to someone at the development office, a sales representative, who told her that construction could begin on a custom build while the financing was still being finalized, as long as they put down a deposit. They put down $38,000. I don't know where that money came from. I'm still not completely sure, but the plan was clear. Get the house started, get me locked in by the time I'd feel too guilty to walk away, and then present the mortgage as a fait accompli. I found all of this out from the app. The building management app, the one for the condo, had a linked portal for the development company because it was the same property group. When that notification came through at 6:47 in the morning, it was flagging a document that had been submitted to update the primary tenant information on the condo lease, adding the new property address as a forwarding reference. Someone had entered my name and my contact information on preliminary paperwork for the new build without asking me. I stood in my hallway in my work apron and I read that notification and I felt something that had been building for 2 years finally go completely quiet and cold inside me. I called Corinne. She didn't ask questions. She just said, "What do you need?" I said, "I need you to come over, and I need you to bring your laptop, and I need to figure out exactly what they've put my name on." We spent 4 hours that morning going through everything. I pulled every document I'd ever signed. I contacted the development office directly, pretending I needed to confirm the status of the preliminary filing. The woman I spoke to was helpful in the way that people are when they don't know there's a problem. She confirmed that my name had been listed as the anticipated primary borrower on internal intake paperwork. and that a financing application was expected to be submitted within the next 2 to 3 weeks. No one had asked me. I thanked her calmly and hung up. Corinne looked at me from across my kitchen table. I said, "I'm done." She said, "I know." I called the condo leasing office next. I explained that I would not be renewing my cosigner status when the lease came up in 6 weeks and that I was formally notifying them in writing as required by my agreement. The leasing agent walked me through the steps. I followed them exactly. Then I called a housing attorney, someone Corinne's cousin had used, and I explained the situation with my name on the development paperwork. She told me that because no mortgage application had actually been submitted in my name yet, I had not been formally obligated to anything. She told me to send a certified letter to the development company stating clearly that I had not authorized use of my personal information and would not be proceeding as a borrower. I wrote that letter that afternoon. I sent it certified mail. I sent a copy by email with read receipt. I saved everything. Then I waited. Preston called me on a Tuesday. It had been 11 days since I sent the letters, and I think Ivy had only just found out. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't mention that the last time we'd seen each other, I'd left their place with a bruise on my wrist from where Ivy had grabbed me, actually grabbed my arm, fingers digging in, when I'd said I needed some space to think about the mortgage. I'd pulled away. She'd called it an accident. Preston had said she didn't mean it like that and looked at his shoes. He called me and he said, "Autumn, what did you do?" Not a question. A sentence. I said, "I withdrew from an agreement I never made." He said Ivy was devastated. He said the builder had already started grading the lot. He said that without my income on the application, the loan would almost certainly be denied. He said I was doing this on purpose to hurt them. I said, "Preston." She grabbed my arm hard enough to leave marks. "And you looked at the floor." He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, "You need to stop making everything about you," and he hung up. I put my phone down on the counter, and I stood very still in my kitchen, and I breathed the way I teach patients to breathe. Deliberately, from the diaphragm, because it was either that or fall apart, and I had already decided I was not going to fall apart. The loan was denied 16 days later. I know because the development company contacted me, still, apparently, had me on file as the anticipated borrower to let me know the application that had been submitted under Preston's name alone had not met the income threshold. They were sorry to inform me. Was there anything they could do to assist? I said no thank you. I said I appreciated the call. I hung up and sat very quietly for a moment. The $38,000 deposit was non-refundable past the initial cooling-off period. That period had expired weeks ago. The builder was not legally obligated to return it. I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be clear about that. I felt tired in a way I hadn't even fully recognized until that moment, the specific exhaustion of spending 2 years giving pieces of yourself to people who were cataloging what you had left. Corinne came over that night with food from the Thai place I like. My friend Deb came too, and she brought wine, and we sat on my floor because I didn't have a proper couch yet. I'd been putting off buying one. Somehow always finding something else the money needed to go toward. And they let me talk and they let me not talk, and nobody asked me to explain or justify or perform being okay. Around midnight, Deb said, "You know what I keep thinking about?" She said, "I keep thinking about the fact that you've been putting off buying a couch for yourself for 2 years. I looked at the floor where we were sitting. I said, "Yeah." She said, "We're buying you a couch this weekend." I laughed for the first time in what felt like a long time. It wasn't a big laugh, but it was real, and it was mine. There's a thing people say, maybe you've heard it, about chosen family. About how the people you build around yourself can sometimes hold you better than the ones you were born to. I used to think that was something people said to feel better about difficult situations, a kind of consolation prize framing. I'm not sure I think that anymore. Preston sent me a text 2 days after the loan denial. It said, "I hope you're proud of yourself. Don't contact us." I read it. I didn't respond. I saved it the way I'd been saving everything. I heard through my aunt, one of my mom's sisters, who had always been quietly suspicious of Ivy, that they'd had to give up the build entirely and were looking for a new apartment. Without my co-signature on the condo renewal, they'd had to vacate that unit too. They were staying with Ivy's parents somewhere across town. My aunt asked me if I felt bad. I thought about it honestly before I answered. I said, "I feel bad that my brother is in a hard situation. I don't feel bad that I stopped letting someone use me. Those are two different things, and I'm allowed to hold both. She said, your mother would be proud of you. And then, after a pause, she said, I think your mother would also say she should have been clearer about what take care of your brother actually meant. I think about that a lot. I bought the couch. It's green, the specific shade that interior people call sage, but is really just a nice calm green. And it's deep enough that you can actually lie down on it, which I do sometimes on my days off with a book or just the quiet. I bought it myself. I carried the financing myself. I put it in the apartment I lease under my own name that I pay for alone, that is slowly starting to look like somewhere a person actually lives rather than a staging area where I deposit myself between shifts. I'm not going to tell you I have everything figured out. Preston and I haven't spoken in 4 months. That's a loss I carry, and I'll probably carry it for a long time because I love my brother even when I can't be around him. But love isn't the same thing as availability, and available is something I got confused about for too long. If Ivy had not grabbed my arm, maybe I would have kept stalling. Maybe I would have found a reason to say yes to the mortgage and then found another reason after that. I don't know. I want to believe I would have gotten there eventually. But the bruise was clarifying in a way that 2 years of exhaustion hadn't been. It made something undeniable that I had been working very hard to deny. My mom said, keep an eye on your brother. She didn't say, give him everything. She didn't say, let his choices become your liability. She didn't say, let someone put your name on things without asking. She said, keep an eye on him, and I think what she meant was don't let him disappear from your life the way our father did. But I'm still here. I'm not the one who sent the last text. I keep the eye open. I just stopped letting it cost me everything I had. A few weeks ago, I was leaving work after a long shift. Not as long as that first night, the night I saw the notification, but long enough. The sun was just coming up over the parking garage, that particular early morning gold that you only see if you work the hours nobody else wants. I stood next to my car for a minute and just watched it. I wasn't in a hurry. There was nowhere I needed to be except home, where there was a green couch and leftover noodles in the fridge and a quiet that belonged entirely to me. I drove home. I ate the noodles standing up at the counter because I was too tired to sit, and I thought, this is mine. This small, specific, ordinary moment is completely mine. Nobody is going to send me a spreadsheet about it. Nobody is going to tell me my mother would have wanted me to share it. I got in bed. I slept until noon. It was the best sleep I'd had in 2 years. I've been thinking a lot lately about what it actually means to take care of someone. For 2 years, I thought I knew. I thought it meant showing up, signing things, transferring money, buying groceries that nobody thanked me for. I thought taking care of my brother meant making his life easier, softer, more possible, even when doing that made my own life smaller and smaller until I was sleeping in an apartment I barely recognized as mine. Putting off buying a couch because there was always somewhere else the money needed to go. What I've come to understand, slowly and only because the situation forced me to, is that there's a difference between caring for someone and funding someone's refusal to grow. I spent a long time confusing those two things. And the people around me, Ivy specifically, were very good at making sure I stayed confused. That's the thing about manipulation that nobody really tells you. It doesn't feel like manipulation while it's happening. It feels like love. It feels like obligation. It feels like the voice of someone you lost, your mom, your dad, whoever, reminding you what a good person does. Ivy never once said, give me your money. She said, Preston needs stability. She said, your mother would have wanted this. She handed me a laminated floor plan and let me draw my own conclusions. That's not an accident. That's a skill, and she had been practicing it long before she met me. The bruise on my wrist was the first honest thing that happened between us in 2 years. I don't say that to be dramatic. I say it because it's true that clarity sometimes only arrives through something undeniable. I had been telling myself a story, that this was temporary, that Preston would find his footing, that Ivy wasn't really who I was starting to think she was, and I had kept that story alive through an enormous amount of daily effort. The bruise made the story impossible to maintain, and once I stopped maintaining it, I could see the shape of everything else clearly for the first time. Preston made his choices throughout all of this. That's the part that's hardest to sit with, not Ivy. I made my peace with who she is. But Preston stood in that apartment and looked at his shoes. Preston called me and said, "Stop making everything about you," when what I was making it about was the fact that his partner had physically hurt me. Preston sent that last text and then went silent. Those are his choices, and they belong to him, and the consequences, the lost deposit, the denied loan, the scramble for a new apartment, those belong to him too. I didn't cause those consequences. I just stopped preventing them. That's the piece I had to untangle carefully, because it would have been easy to feel guilty. It would have been easy to say, if I had just signed, none of this would have happened. But that's not how cause and effect actually works. What caused this was 2 years of Preston and Ivy building a life on a foundation they didn't own, assuming I would always be underneath it. What caused this was someone putting my name on paperwork without asking. What caused this was the moment Ivy's fingers closed around my wrist. I just stopped being the thing that held the structure up. Corinne told me once, before any of this years ago, that the most important thing she ever learned was the difference between guilt and responsibility. Responsibility is, I made a choice and I will own it. Guilt is, someone else made a choice, and I am absorbing it as if it were mine. For 2 years, I had been doing the second thing and calling it love. I'm a respiratory therapist. My entire job is teaching people to breathe when their body has forgotten how. There's something I tell patients when they're panicking and fighting the process: you cannot help anyone else breathe if you've run out of air yourself. I had been running on empty for so long I'd stopped noticing. The green couch, the quiet apartment, the noodles I ate standing at the counter on my own terms, those are not small things. Those are what it looks like when someone finally stops giving away their air. I don't know what happens with Preston from here. I keep that open. But I know this: the next thing I sign will have my name on it because I put it there.